Hello my friends, and welcome to the channel for another Baldur's Gate 3 character build. Today I've got another Paladin Warlock multi-class build for you, but this time instead of focusing on maximizing the damage of one single smite, this build lets you embrace the darkness and force your enemies to fight you in the pitch black. I never would have thought Paladin would mix so well with Warlock in a character build, but it turns out there's a ton of ways that these two classes can support each other when they're combined. With 5 levels of Paladin and 5 levels of Warlock, you can actually attack 3 times in one round, and you get access to a lot of really useful spells as well. With this build, you'll be able to cast Darkness on a group of enemies, push into melee range, and get advantage on every enemy you attack while forcing them to take disadvantage on every attack against you. On top of that, you have access to a ton of powerful utility and healing magic, and you can take advantage of this build's ability to attack 3 times in a single turn to deal an insane amount of damage with triple smite combos. For my playthrough, I set this character up on the companion Shadowheart, turning her from a cleric of the Dark Lady Shar to a fearsome dark paladin who truly embraces the darkness. That being said, you can just as easily set this up on your main character or any other companion. With that intro out of the way, let's take a look at the build, how I would level this character up, and how it plays in combat. For your first 5 levels, you're going to choose between 5 levels of Paladin or 5 levels of Warlock, and then swap into the other class at level 6. This is to make sure that you gain your second attack as early as possible. Since we're doing the levels in chunks of 5, it doesn't really matter which one you start with. I'm going to start as a Paladin for this guide, because I think having a Paladin on your team is really useful at the start of the game. And this way our character is starting off with all of the equipment proficiencies available right away. If you want to start as a Warlock instead, that's fine, and I'll have a timestamp for the Warlock levels so you can skip ahead. For my starting ability scores, I made Strength my main stat at 17 points for the early game so I could hit enemies harder and more often. I put Dexterity at 13, and both of these will be bumped up to 14 and 18 at level 4 to add extra bonuses. Next, I had Constitution at 16 for the extra health because this build is going to be in melee all the time. Intelligence I left at 8 because it doesn't really affect any of our skills, and Wisdom and Charisma I left at 10 to not take any penalties on saving throws. Normally you would want to give a Paladin some extra Charisma, but for this build we won't really get any of the features that use Charisma, and at level 8 we're going to respec into a full Charisma build anyways to take advantage of the Warlock traits. So for the early game you probably want Strength for combat. For my Paladin subclass, I picked the Oath of the Ancients because I wanted my Shadowheart to kind of be a damage dealing tank, and the Healing Radiance ability is actually kind of awesome for emergency healing, because it scales up with your level and it heals everyone around you for 2 turns in a row. If you want to take a different oath though, it's not a big deal, this isn't really crucial to the build. At level 2, you gain the ability to Divine Smite and add radiant damage to your attacks, and a fighting style. For my build, I actually picked the defense fighting style because like I said, I wanted this character to be a tank, with the ability to smash enemies down with a heavy smite as a nice bonus. That being said, if you want to maximize your damage instead, just roll with great weapon fighting. For my early spells, the important one for me was Shield of Faith, which lets you hold concentration for a +2 AC bonus, making you even harder to hit. At level 3, you gain a class feature based on your oath. For Devotion, that's immunity to disease. And you also gain some spells and some more unique Paladin abilities that will change depending on your subclass. Overall, this isn't a huge level for the build, but you will get some tools for your kit. At level 4, you're going to get an extra Lay on Hands charge, 1 more spell slot, and then a feat, which you're going to put into an ability improvement and bump up Strength and Dexterity by 1 point each to claim an extra ability score bonus. Now at level 5, you gain access to level 2 spells, including spells specific to your oath as a Paladin. Oath of the Ancients Paladins get Misty Step as a spell for free, which is really good on melee characters, so that's another bonus of playing this subclass. Most importantly for us though, at level 5 the Paladin gets an extra attack, which can also be used with the Smite ability, so you can start putting out some crazy single target damage right here. At level 6, we're now going to swap over to the Warlock class and embrace the darkness, and we're going to stay in Warlock all the way to level 10, ending up with 5 levels in both classes. Personally, I liked the Fiend subclass because it gets pretty good spells by level 5, but the Great Old One also works pretty well to gain extra effects on your critical hits. For your cantrips, you're definitely going to take Eldritch Blast, which will be your primary ranged damage for this build. And then I recommend taking Friends, which lets you gain advantage on speech checks. For your spells, you can kind of take whatever you want, but I stick with Armor of Agathis and Hex just to keep it simple. At level 2 for the Warlock, you gain your Eldritch Invocations, which is quite important for how this build will start to ramp up in the mid-game. First, you want to take Agonizing Blast, which will add your Charisma modifier to your Eldritch Blast ranged attacks. This will really start coming into play in one more level at level 8. Next, you want to take Devil's Sight, which gives you the ability to see in magical darkness, meaning you can run straight into the middle of the darkness spell and take no disadvantage on your attacks. Now level 8 is going to be a big level for this build, because now we can respec our character and start fresh with max charisma to take full advantage of the Pact of the Blade Warlock feature, which lets you bind a weapon with magic so it scales with charisma instead of strength or dexterity. So when you do the respec, you want to move your points from strength over into charisma at level 1 to take advantage of this. While you're doing this, you can also dump your points out of dexterity if you decide to wear heavy armor. But for my build, I was using medium armor, so I left everything the same. I just put my strength points into charisma. The other huge thing that you get at Warlock level 3 is the ability to cast darkness yourself, which, when combined with your Devil's Sight ability, means you can create a spot of darkness to fight in, forcing enemies into a really one-sided battle. You can also use other spellcasters to make darkness for you, or if you make a certain choice in Shadowheart's storyline in Act 2, you get an entire set of gear with abilities based around creating and fighting in darkness, which kind of supercharges this build, if you're willing to live with the story consequences. At level 9, you're going to gain another feat. There's a lot of pretty good options available, but for this video, I'm just going to keep it simple and raise my charisma up to 20, getting an extra +1 to all damage and charisma checks. When you hit level 10, you've kind of reached the second big power spike for this build, because now that you have 5 levels of Paladin and 5 levels of Pact of the Blade Warlock, you actually gain a third attack to use every single round, so long as you're attacking with the weapon that you binded using Pact of the Blade. Now this apparently isn't supposed to work like this in regular D&D, but it does work in Baldur's Gate, and it has remained for over 4 hotfixes, so it seems like it's intended. From here on out, you can now use Smite up to 3 times in one turn, which can stack up some insane damage if you roll well. And because you gain advantage when fighting in darkness, you often have a 99% accuracy when attacking enemies, so you rarely miss. The other huge thing you gain as a level 5 Warlock is level 3 spell slots, which can be used in a few different ways. First, you can use these spell slots for your smite attacks, adding even more extra damage. You can also use these spell slots to cast powerful spells like Fireball or Counterspell, which you can learn at this level as a Fiend Warlock. And best of all, both of your new level 3 spell slots recharge on a short rest, so you can pop both of them in a combat, do a short rest, and be ready for the next fight. This level 10 power spike is really strong, and you're going to see your damage go through the roof from here on out. Finally, you also gain an extra invocation, which you can pick for yourself, or just go with Beguiling Influence, which gets you proficiency in some useful speech skills. Finally, we have our last 2 levels, which are kind of wide open for a few good choices. For my build, I just put my last 2 levels into Fighter to gain Action Surge, and to get an extra fighting style. With Action Surge, you can smite 6 times on the first turn of combat. This burns up a lot of spell slots, but you can also just dumpster some really big enemies all the way to 0 HP, so it's really useful. Another recommendation that I saw was to take 2 levels of War Priest Cleric, which also gets you some extra attacks by using the War Priest charges. Both of these choices are pretty solid, so it's up to you, just follow your heart. After level 10, you're already so powerful that really any choice is kind of a good choice. That basically covers it for the important features of this build, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Personally, I made this setup on Shadowheart after I followed her Dark Justiciar storyline, and I would highly recommend that you try it out because the gear that you get from it is kind of amazing. That being said, it does have some pretty big story impacts, and I don't want to spoil it, but it's a tough choice. Once you hit level 10, this build really pops off, and you can start going toe-to-toe with really strong enemies in the darkness and walk away basically untouched. I had a lot of fun with this build, and I hope you do too. Let me know how it works for you down in the comments. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream and Discord server down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe out there, everyone.